Don't you find the connection between music and magic in most fantasy settings to be kinda interesting? Magic and music have a long history in the stories we tell, dating back thousands of years. And today, we're gonna explore the darker side of this connection. Hello and welcome to Monster of the Week, the only show on the internet that fully endorses the banned kid to undead abomination pipeline. This week, we're looking at a group of undead musicians sure to chill your bones and make you dance till you're dead, the Crypt Chanters. As always, we're going to talk about the Crypt Chanters' lore and ecology, where they come from, what they're up to, and of course go over some story ideas for how you can use them at the game table. We're also going to convert them from D&D 3rd edition into 5e with some shiny new artwork for you to use as you see fit. This is actually a monster I wanted to talk about back in October during spooky season, but I ran out of time, so now we're going to talk about it during the holidays, which for some of you might actually be the scariest time of the year. But before we dig up this disturbing undead monster, I need to talk to you about something I find truly disturbing. And that of course is having my information stolen by knaves and brigands on the internet. But thankfully, NordVPN has a way to prevent such things. A VPN is a virtual private network. I imagine most of you probably already know what that is and how it works, but for a super simple explanation, it allows you to connect to the internet through one of Nord's many high-speed servers that run out of 60 different countries. It's an awesome service because not only does Nord protect you from hackers, online scammers, and malware, but it can also be used to virtually change your location so that if, say, for example, you really wanted to pretend it's 1999 and watch the Blair Witch Project on Netflix, but you're not in the UK, with the press of a button, you are now connected to a server in the United Kingdom and you can watch people stare into the corner as much as you like. Something I actually learned when I was exploring content from other countries is that the UK has the largest Netflix catalog compared to any other country by a lot, and Canada is actually second, with a lot of content that is country specific. So in other words, there's tons of content from other countries around the world to explore that you might not even know exists. To put it in D&D terms, it lets you cast non-detection and Nistel's magic aura at the same time with your computer. And they even have an app for your smartphone so you can keep yourself safe and entertained while connected to public Wi-Fi. And because Nord has so many servers, they're able to provide a really fast connection that in my experience has been quite seamless. So whether you're interested in Nord for its one-click online security or because you just want to check out content from other countries around the world, in either case, you can try it out for 30 days completely risk-free. And if you don't like it for any reason, Nord has a money-back guarantee. And if you do decide to sign up right now as part of their holiday offerings, you can get up to 4 months completely free. All you gotta do is follow my link in the pinned comment and the description down below. That's nordvpn.com/dungeondad. Check out Nord for yourself and see if it's right for you. So thank you, Nord, for sponsoring this video about the dutiest Dootin' monster I've ever seen. Speaking of which, I hope you pack some extra earplugs or some wax or cotton or something, because it's time for Monster of the Week. Today we are taking a trip back to everyone's favorite horror-themed D&D book from 3rd edition, Libris Mortis, the Book of Undead. Like many of the other undead monsters in this book, the Crypt Chanter would be a complete one-off, only ever appearing once in all of D&D's history. Which is a shame, because this thing taps into a lot of awesome ideas. And by awesome ideas, I mean, it lets you murder adventurers with the power of music. So, what exactly is a Crypt Chanter? On the surface, it's an undead rock star. They appear as humanoid undead that can be of any species, and while they may look very tangible, they are actually incorporeal undead, making them essentially a musically talented ghost. Their pallid gray flesh is obscured by a dark cloak that is supernatural in nature, keeping the creature obscured in a veil of darkness. Apparently they're undead metalheads. The original artwork depicts a pair of them playing the flute, but a Crypt Chanter, much like a bard, can perform any type of instrument to fuel their profane magic, including the use of their singing voice.
Do instruments of torture count? No.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
The instruments they play are also magical and ethereal in nature, meaning that a newly born Crypt Chanter can summon an instrument at will. And if the creature is destroyed, its instrument vanishes along with it. Now, as I always say, every undead monster always has a story behind its creation, and not all undead are created equally. There's a vastly different set of circumstances that leads to the creation of something like a revenant versus a zombie or skeleton, for example, and often the story behind an undead's creation is especially involved when the creature in question is sentient. which the Crypt Chanter most definitely is. Unfortunately, given their status as one-off monsters, we have no official explanation for where the first Crypt Chanters ever came from. We do, however, know how they propagate their species, and that, of course, is with music. When the Crypt Chanter begins to sing, play its flute, or otherwise perform using its instrument of choice, it has devastating effects on living creatures who can hear it. It starts by lulling the living into an enthralled state where its victims can do nothing but stop and stare at the chanter's performance. Then, if nothing is done to stop it, the dark magic in the chanter's melody begins to infect the people it has transfixed with song. This infection quickly takes root, causing the afflicted to dance and sing along with the horrid melody. It then begins channeling away the life force from its audience into the creature itself. And once a living creature has had their life force completely drained, they die, and rise again as a Crypt Chanter destined to join the performance of their creator. So if ever set loose on a highly populated area, even if some of the living manage to resist the Crypt Chanter's song of undeath, usually enough of them will fall to the chanter's tune to quickly turn the tide against those who still live. But this dance macabre isn't without its weak spots. Probably the most glaring of which is that the Crypt Chanter can't exist in an area of direct, natural sunlight. When exposed to direct sunlight, their musical powers don't work, and they become completely vulnerable. The only thing they can do in an area of direct sunlight is take the dash action and try to run to the shadows. Well, that and crying is always a free action. As incorporeal beings, they can pass through walls and stuff like a ghost, so this isn't too hard for them to achieve, but it does mean that any incursions into the land of the living are going to take place during nighttime hours. The other glaring weak spot in the Crypt Chanter's armor is that beyond their necrotic music, they're quite physically weak, but I think that's starting to get into mechanics territory. So let's move on and talk about just exactly what makes the Crypt Chanter tick. Clocking in with a challenge rating of 7, the Crypt Chanter is certainly no joke. As I just mentioned, their list of attacks is pretty limited. The only actual attack action they have is called Withering Touch, and it does 4d6 necrotic damage. That's not nothing, but compared to other monsters at the same challenge rating, it's on the low end. But the real reason you'd want to use this monster as a DM, of course, is because of their draining melody. This massive wall of text explains how the draining melody works, but allow me to break it down in simple terms. Essentially, if you can hear and you're within 60 feet of a Crypt Chanter, you need to make a wisdom saving throw while it performs. If you fail, you're stunned. And then at the end of your next turn, you get to make another wisdom saving throw to try and break free, and if you fail that one too, you are now enthralled. Any creature enthralled by the Chanter takes a bunch of psychic damage at the end of their turn, and if that damage knocks you down to 0, you die. Anytime you take that damage, you are of course allowed another saving throw to break free of the melody, but if you can't shake loose after you die, you come back to life 1d4 rounds later as a Crypt Chanter. And anytime a new Crypt Chanter is created, while they of course become an evil NPC under the DM's control, they are also directly under the control of the Crypt Chanter who created them. And then any Crypt Chanters they create will be under their control, but of course they're still under the control of the Crypt Chanter who created them, so it's just a giant pyramid scheme of Crypt Chanters all the way down. This of course means that if a Crypt Chanter who created a bunch of other Crypt Chanters is killed, it essentially allows them to splinter off and go do whatever they want. They might still work together, but they don't have to. But it does mean that if one of these things is just allowed to freely roam through town, every person it kills is going to come back as a new band member, which is bad for anyone who doesn't want to be killed and brought back to life as a new band member. This is obviously really scary for an adventuring party to go up against, but it's also a near guaranteed death sentence for a bunch of commoners in town if nobody stops the thing. Commoners aren't exactly known for their survivability. It is also worth noting that if you manage to make your saving throw against the Crypt Chanter's song even once, you are immune to that Crypt Chanter's melody. The Crypt Chanter can stop playing and start performing a new song, which you will have to make a new saving throw against if it wants, but if it does that, this also means any creatures who are being affected by its song are instantly released and allowed to make a new saving throw against the new song. So depending on the circumstance, it may simply continue playing the same melody trying to dominate as many people as possible with it, or it might be skipping through songs like a teenager with their first iPod. Why do you have 10,000 songs on there if you're gonna just skip them all until you get to the same 20 tracks you always listen to? God, this joke is so dated. When did I get so old? Something I do really like about this creature's design, though, is that because of the way its draining melody works, you have to be able to hear it, which opens up a lot of options for the players. Casting silence suddenly becomes a godsend, and taking the time to prepare by stuffing your ears with cotton or wax will also get you pretty far.
Children, fingers in your ears and make the la-la sound. La-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la.
If the characters do decide to deafen themselves as a preventative measure against the Crypt Chanter's tunes, I would highly recommend forbidding the players from speaking to each other regarding things that are happening in the game. While not necessarily required by the rules or anything, it can be a really fun roleplay and also combat challenge to try to coordinate your plans by only communicating with hand signals and looks across the table. While generally pretty simple in concept, I find the Crypt Chanter to both be horrifying and really compelling for some reason. For me, I think it all circles back to the idea of magic as music, which is a topic I could make a whole video about, and who knows, maybe someday I will. But for now, let's talk about where this monster really shines, and that is in the plot hooks department. The Crypt Chanter is one of those monsters that can be played entirely straight and fit right at home in a serious horror campaign, or be played entirely silly while still being a proper threat. You could easily set them up as a proper haunting, although instead of your typical ghost, you would have the Crypt Chanter luring people away from town each night with its haunting melody. Each night, it seems, someone from the town disappears into the darkness, and while the party investigates, the Crypt Chanter slowly builds up a symphony of undeath. Perhaps you even have a bard turned lich who is acting as the conductor of this symphony, and they're using the Crypt Chanters as lesser minions. Maybe they're even specifically targeting musically inclined members of society, headhunting them, and using the Crypt Chanter's melody to transform them into musical undead. To what end? That's up to you. It could be something as simple as amassing a powerful army of minions, or perhaps once they've completed an entire undead orchestra, they are able to perform a sort of ritual that will grant them incredible power or something. Maybe your musical lich or necromancer is trying to perform a profane love song that will bring their deceased lover back to life. Or perhaps the ritual is the very thing that will ascend the bardic necromancer from a mere mortal to the status of proper lich. But whatever the case, this is bad news for the surrounding populace and terrible news for any accomplished musicians. Maybe the party gets involved because they're hired to investigate all the disappearing musicians around town. Not only are they trying to figure out what's happened to them, but they're also trying to protect the still remaining members of the town's musical community. Maybe the first violin of the local orchestra has hired the party as bodyguards, fearing that they may be next to disappear into the night. There are so many twists and turns that this story could take, but I feel like a final showdown with a conductor lich and his orchestra of undead minions would be a perfect finale to a campaign. Or maybe for the Satanic Panic fans in the room, there is a heavy metal band roaming from city to city, and their music is allegedly causing corruption among the youth, causing them to run away into the night. The truth, of course, is actually much more sinister. I know, more sinister than heavy metal. I also really like the idea of a Crypt Chanter just showing up as part of an undead army. Maybe they're there to provide morale and support for the skeletons and zombies charging the gates, because remember, even if their song doesn't kill the living people who hear it, it might paralyze them long enough for a group of other undead to get some free attacks in. This actually makes them great support units, and if they do happen to kill anyone with their song, the little musical division of the Dark Lord's undead army will only grow stronger. As a kid who played trombone in army cadets, I can assure you the military band is always looking to add to its ranks. Another thing you should try to keep in mind is that the Crypt Chanter is no mindless undead. They have an intelligence of 14, which actually makes them pretty smart. So not only will they be capable of concocting plans and schemes, but they can also speak and communicate. This means they could end up in all sorts of alliances, rivalries, or any other social circumstance you can think up. Maybe there are even two rival Crypt Chanters that are competing in a battle of the bands type situation, except they're catching tons of innocents in the crossfire. And if you want to keep it simple, hey, one of these things lurking in a dungeon, filling the halls with its haunting music, could make for a great random encounter. But ultimately, no matter what you choose to do, the Crypt Chanter is a really neat little piece of D&D's history, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about it. As always, linked in the description down below, there is a Google document that contains all the 5th edition stats you will need to run this thing successfully at the game table. And of course, if you are one of my lovely Patreon supporters, over on the Dungeon Dad Patreon page, you can find the 5e stat block presented in a high-res PDF with the new artwork and all kinds of fancy little touches. The information's all the same. It's just my way of saying thank you for the extra support you guys throw my way. Speaking of patrons, it's time for Patron of the Week! This week's randomly selected patron is Christopher Parker. Thank you so much for parking your eyes in front of my content. I truly appreciate it. And thank you for watching. As always, if there's a monster from an older edition of D&D, Pathfinder, another TTRPG, or even just from pop culture or something that you really like and you would like to see converted into 5th edition and talked about on this channel, let me know in the comments down below or over on the Monster Suggestions channel on the Dungeon Dad Discord, which is also linked in the description down below, and your suggestion will be added to the Master Monster Suggestions list, and who knows, you might just see it show up in a future episode of Monster of the Week. I appreciate you guys so much for showing up here every week to check out what we're working on. If you do like what I'm doing here and you want to support the channel, a real easy and free way to do that is to like this video, subscribe if you're not already. All that stuff helps me up a bunch, helps me out a bunch. It's helpful. But otherwise, I will catch you in the next one. Stick around to the very end for a preview of what's coming next week, and I'll see you then.
Is that a fiendish Frankenstein I see? Well, technically, it's a fiendish Frankenstein's monster, but you know what I mean. An amalgamated freak of the 9 hells is on the way, and the hags had a hand in its creation too. Next episode, Stitched Devil. Tune in next time for lots more fan service.